you go, off you go. The bell rang 5 minutes ago. Off to class now, he said, shooing some of the younger students away. And you, Malfoy. Harry, glancing over, saw Malfoy stoop and snatch up something. Leering, he showed it to Crabbe and Goyle. And Harry realized that he'd gotten Riddle's diary. Give that back, said Harry quietly. Wonder what Potter's written in this, said Malfoy, who obviously hadn't noticed the year on the cover and thought he had Harry's own diary. A hush fell over the onlookers. Ginny was staring from the diary to Harry, looking terrified. Hand it over, Malfoy, said Percy sternly. When I've had a look, said Malfoy, waving the diary tauntingly at Harry. Percy said, at school, perfect. But Harry had lost his temper. He pulled out his wand and shouted, Expelliarmus! And just as Snape had disarmed Lockhart, so Malfoy found the diary shooting out of his hand and into the air. Ron, grinning broadly, caught it. Harry, said Percy loudly. No magic in the corridors. I'll have to report you. But Harry didn't care. He was one up on Malfoy, and that was worth 5 points from Gryffindor any day. Malfoy was looking furious, and as Ginny passed him to enter her classroom, he yelled spitefully after her. I don't think Potter liked your Valentine very much. Ginny covered her face with her hands and ran into class. Snarling, Ron pulled out his wand too, but Harry pulled him away. Ron didn't need to spin the whole of charms belching slugs. It wasn't until they had reached Professor Flitwick's class that Harry noticed something odd about Riddle's diary. All the other books were drenched in scarlet ink. The diary, however, was as clean as it was before the ink bottle had smashed all over it. He tried to point this out to Ron, but Ron was having trouble with his wand again. Large purple bubbles were blossoming out of the end, and he wasn't much interested in anything else. Harry went to bed before anyone else in his dormitory that night. This was partly because he didn't think he could stand Fred and George singing, His eyes are green as fresh pickled toads, one more time, and partly because he wanted to examine Riddle's diary again and knew that Ron thought he was wasting his time. Harry sat on his four-poster and flicked through the blank pages, not one of which had a trace of scarlet ink on it. Then he pulled a new bottle out of his bedside chamber, dipped his quill into it, and dropped a blot on the first page of the diary. The ink shone brightly on the paper for a second, and then, as though it was being sucked into the page, vanished. Excited, Harry loaded up his quill a second time and wrote, My name is Harry Potter. The words shone momentarily on the page. They too sank without a trace. Then at last, something happened. Oozing back out of the page in his very own ink came the words Harry had never written. Hello, Harry Potter. My name is Tom Riddle. How did you come by my diary? These words too faded away, but not before Harry had started to scribble back. Someone tried to flush it down a toilet. Harry waited eagerly for Riddle's reply. Lucky that I recorded my memories in some more lasting way than ink. But I always knew that there would be those who would not want to read that diary. What do you mean? Harry scrawled, blotting the page in his excitement. I mean that this diary holds memories of terrible things, things that were covered up, things that happened at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. That's where I am now, Harry wrote quickly. I'm at Hogwarts, and terrible stuff has been happening. Do you know anything about the Chamber of Secrets? His heart was hammering. Riddle's reply came quickly. His writing became untidier, as though he was hurrying to tell all he knew. Of course I know about the Chamber of Secrets. In my day, they told us it was a legend, that it did not exist, but that was a lie. In my 5th year, the chamber was open and the monster attacked several students, finally killing one. I caught the person who'd opened the chamber and he was expelled. But the headmaster, Professor Dippet, ashamed that such a thing happened at Hogwarts, forbade me to tell the truth. A story was given out that the girl had died in a freak accident. They gave me a nice, shiny, engraved trophy for my trouble and warned me to keep my mouth shut. But I knew it could happen again. The monster lived on, and the one who had the power to release it was not imprisoned. Harry nearly upset his ink bottle in a hurry to write back. It's happening again now. There have been 3 attacks, and no one seemed to know who's behind them. Who was it last time? I can show you if you'd like, came Riddle's reply. You don't have to take my word for it. I can take you inside my memory of the night when I caught him. Harry hesitated, his quill suspended over the diary. What did Riddle mean? How could he be taken inside someone else's memory? He glanced nervously at the door to the dormitory, which was growing dark. When he looked back at the diary, he saw fresh words forming. Let me show you. Harry paused for a fraction of a second and then wrote 2 letters. Okay. The pages of the diary began to blow as though caught in a high wind, stopping halfway through the month of June. Mouth hanging open, Harry saw that the little square for June 13th seemed to have turned into a minuscule television screen. His hands trembling slightly, he raised the book to press his eye against the little window. And before he knew what was happening, he was tilting forward. The window was widening. He felt his body leave his bed, and he was pitched headfirst through the opening in the page into a whirl of color and shadow. He felt his feet hit solid ground and stood shaking as the blurred shapes around him came into focus. He knew immediately where he was. The circular room with the sleeping portraits was Dumbledore's office, but it wasn't Dumbledore who was sitting behind the desk. A wizened, frail-looking wizard, bald except for a few wisps of white hair, was reading a letter by candlelight. Harry had never seen this man before. I'm sorry, he said shakingly. I didn't mean to butt in. But the wizard didn't look up. He continued to read, frowning slightly. Harry drew nearer to his desk, stammered, I'll just go, shall I? Still, the wizard ignored him. He didn't seem to even have heard him. Thinking that the wizard might be deaf, Harry raised his voice. Sorry I disturbed you. I'll go for now, he half shouted. The wizard folded up the letter with a sigh, stood up, walked past Harry without a glance at him, and went to draw the curtains at his window. The sky outside the window was ruby red. It seemed to be sunset. The wizard went back to his desk, sat down, and twiddled his thumbs, watching the door. Harry looked around the office. No Fawkes the Phoenix, no whirling silver contraption. This was Hogwarts as Riddle had known it, meaning that this unknown wizard was headmaster, not Dumbledore, and he, Harry, was little more than a phantom completely invisible to the people 50 years ago. There was a knock on the office door. Enter, said the old wizard in a feeble voice. A boy of about 16 entered, taking off his pointed hat. A silver prefect's badge was gleaming on his chest. He was much taller than Harry, but he too had jet black hair. Ah, Riddle, said the headmaster. You wanted to see me, Professor Dippet, said Riddle. He looked nervous. Sit down, said Dippet. I've just been reading the letter you sent me. Oh, said Riddle. He sat down, gripping his hands together very tightly. My dear boy, said Dippet kindly, I cannot possibly let you stay at school over the summer. Surely you want to go home for the holidays. No, said Riddle at once. I'd much rather stay at Hogwarts than go back to that. You lived in a Muggle orphanage during the holidays before, I believe, said Dippet curiously. Yes, sir, said Riddle, reddening slightly. You are Muggle-born? Half-blood, sir, said Riddle. Muggle father, mother witch. And are both your parents? My mother died just after I was born, sir. They told me at the orphanage that she lived just long enough to name me Tom, after my father, Marvello, after my grandfather. Dippet clicked his tongue sympathetically. The thing is, Tom, he sighed, special arrangements might have been made for you, but in current circumstances. You mean all those attacks, sir? said Riddle, and Harry's heart leapt, and he moved closer, scared of missing anything. Precisely, said the headmaster. My dear boy, you must see how foolish it would be for me to allow you to remain at the castle when term ends, particularly in light of the recent tragedies. The death of that poor little girl. You'll be safer by far at your orphanage. As a matter of fact, the Ministry of Magic is even now talking about closing the school. We are no nearer locating the source of all this unpleasantness. Riddle's eyes had widened. Sir, if the person's caught, if it's all stopped? What do you mean? Said Dippet with a squeak in his voice, sitting up in his chair. Riddle, do you mean you know something about these attacks? No, sir, said Riddle quickly. But Harry was sure it was some sort of no that he himself had given Dumbledore. Dippet sank back, looking faintly disappointed. You may go, Tom. Riddle slid off his chair and slouched out of the room. Harry followed him. Down the moving spiral staircase they went, emerging next to the gargoyle in the darkened corridor. Riddle stopped, and so did Harry, watching him. Harry could tell that Riddle was doing some serious thinking. He was biting his lip, his forehead furrowed. Then, as though he had suddenly reached a decision, he hurried off, Harry gliding noiselessly behind him. They didn't see another person until they reached the entrance hall, when a tall wizard with a long, sweeping auburn hair and a beard called to Riddle from the marble staircase. What are you doing wandering this late, Tom? Harry gaped at the wizard. He was none other than a 50-year younger Dumbledore. I had to see the headmaster, sir. Well, hurry off to bed, said Dumbledore, giving Riddle exactly the kind of penetrating stare Harry knew so well. Best not to roam the corridor these days, not since... He sighed heavily, bade Riddle good night, and strode off. Riddle watched him walk out of sight, and then, moving quickly, headed straight down the stone steps to the dungeons, with Harry in hot pursuit. But to Harry's disappointment, Riddle led him not into a hidden passageway or a secret tunnel, but to the very dungeon in which Harry had potions with Snape. The torches hadn't been lit, and Riddle pushed the door almost closed. Harry could only just see him standing stock still by the door, watching the passage outside. It felt to Harry that they were there for at least an hour. All he could see was the figure of Riddle at the door, staring through the crack, waiting like a statue. And then when Harry had stopped feeling expectant and tensed, started wishing he could return to the present, he heard something move beyond the door. Someone is creeping along the passage. He heard whoever it was past the dungeon where he and Riddle were hidden. Riddle, quiet as a shadow, edged through the door and followed Harry, tiptoeing behind him, forgetting that he couldn't be heard. For perhaps 5 minutes they followed the footsteps, until Riddle stopped suddenly, his head inclined in the direction of a new noise. Harry heard a door creak open, and then someone speaking in a hoarse whisper. Come on, gotta get you out of here. Come on now, in the box. There was something familiar about that voice. Riddle suddenly jumped around the corner. Harry stepped out behind him. He could see the dark outline of a huge boy who was crouching in front of an open door and a very large box next to it. Evening, Rubeus, said Riddle sharply. The boy slammed the door shut and stood up. What you doing down here, Tom? Riddle stepped closer. It's all over, he said. I'm going to have to turn you in, Rubeus. They're talking about closing Hogwarts if the attacks don't stop. What did you? I don't think you meant to kill anyone, but monsters don't make good pets. I suppose you just let it out for exercise and... I've never killed no one, said the large boy, backing against the closed door. From behind him, Harry could hear a funny rustling and clicking. Come on, Rubeus, said Riddle, moving yet closer. The dead girl's parents will be here tomorrow. The least Hogwarts can do is make sure that thing that killed their daughter is slaughtered. It wasn't him, roared the boy, his voice echoing in the dark passage. He wouldn't. He never, "Stand aside," said Riddle, drawing out his wand. His spell lit the corridor with a sudden flaming light. The door behind the large boy flew open with such force it knocked him into the opposite wall. And out of it came something that made Harry let out a long, piercing scream, unheard by anyone. A vast, low-slung, hairy body and a tangle of black legs. A gleam of many eyes and a pair of razor-sharp pincers. Riddle raised his wand again, but he was too late. The thing howled him over as it scuttled away, tearing up the corridor and out of sight. Riddle scrambled to his feet, looking after it. He raised his wand, but the huge boy leapt on him, seized the wand, and threw it back down, yelling, "No!" The scene whirled. The darkness became complete. Harry felt himself falling, and with a crash, he landed spread eagle on the four-poster in Gryffindor dormitory, Riddle's diary lying open on his stomach. Before he had time to regain his breath, the dormitory door opened and Ron came in. "There you are," he said. Harry sat up. He was sweating and shaking. "What's up?" said Ron, looking at him with concern. "It's Hagrid, Ron." Hagrid opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago. Have a great weekend.